Welcome back to our home buyer series. In this video, we're going to be talking about one of the most important things that comes up in the entire buying process, and that is the appraisal. There's a lot of information and I don't want to bore you to death or scare you to death, so let's just get right into it. Okay, so I don't know what all you've heard about the appraisal process. I get asked all kinds of questions about this, and there's a lot of different things that can happen. So I'm going to do my best to explain some of the main points that you need to know about that will help you be prepared once you get to this step of the loan process. So first things first, if you are going to purchase a home in Georgia and you're going to be obtaining a loan to purchase that home, an appraisal has to be performed in order to prove to the lender that the money that they are giving you matches the value of the house. Now, here's our first exception to what I just said. Some lenders are able to run a value in their own system and do what's known as an appraisal waiver if they're able to tell that the amount that they're lending you matches the values that they show for the house without having to send out an appraiser. But the majority of the time, most lenders and banks who loan you money to purchase a home will want to do an appraisal to have an independent appraiser give a value of the home. So now that we've established that you are most likely going to have to get an appraisal in order to get your loan on your home, let's talk about that process. The appraisal is usually ordered once you've gotten past the due diligence period, which again is the days at the beginning of going under contract, in which you'll be doing any of your inspections and figuring out if you're going to be moving forward with the purchase or if you're going to be backing out. You usually want to wait to order the appraisal until after inspection for two reasons. One, because you have to pay for the appraisal and they cost around $400 to $500. So if you don't order it up front and then end up getting an inspection and deciding to back out, if the appraisal's already been ordered, there's not much of a cancellation process and you could lose that money. And the second reason you may want to wait until you're sure you're moving forward is because once you place the order, the appraiser or lender will be contacting the listing agent to schedule the appraiser to come out. And once the seller and the seller's agent figure out you've paid for the appraisal, they can take that as a sign that you are moving forward and may be less likely to agree to repairs or other concessions that you've been asking for during the due diligence period. Asking for repairs is just that, asking. The seller is not required to agree to any or all of the repairs that you request. It's a negotiation item. And if they know you aren't backing out and you've already ordered the appraisal, they can sometimes take that as a sign that you are most likely not going to back out even if they refuse to do repairs. The better way to handle this is to get the inspection, submit the repair amendment to get either credit or repairs done, and once all of that is agreed to, then get with the lender and say you're ready to order the appraisal. So once you are sure that you're moving forward with the purchase of the home and all the repair items have been negotiated, you will then need to get with the lender and let them know that they can order the appraisal. They will charge you for the cost of the appraisal. Once it's been ordered, the lender will get with an appraisal management company who will then select an appraiser from a list of appraisers that they use. The appraiser will get with the listing agent and schedule a time that they can come out to view the home. Once they have visited the home and run some reports on comparable home sales in the area and they generate the actual appraisal report, once that's complete, they will send that report over to the lender and it will undergo a brief appraisal review process. And then once that's complete, they will then send it to you, the buyer. It is not sent to the seller or the listing agent who is working to sell the home. Since you, the buyer, have paid for it, it is only supplied to you. Once you have the appraisal back, several things can happen. The first one is the one we hope for, which is that the appraisal comes back and it comes in at value that you're under contract for. So for example, you're under contract for $300,000 purchase price and the appraisal comes back at $300,000. We're good to go. The lender can start working on finalizing the loan process and everybody pretty much starts getting ready to go towards closing. The same thing happens if the appraisal comes in above value. The seller does not have to be supplied a copy, and you as the buyer gets the satisfaction of knowing that you're buying a house that appraised for more than what the purchase price you had agreed to. But what if the appraisal comes in below the purchase price? So now let's talk about where things can get tricky. If the appraisal comes in lower than the agreed upon purchase price, there's several things that can happen, and some of those things that happen are dependent on what changes or what information that you have put into your particular financing exhibit that's attached to the purchase agreement. But to give a broad perspective and without getting into too much detail and making this video longer than it's already going to be, here are the three main things that will happen if the appraiser was to come back with a lower than agreed upon purchase price. The seller can reduce the price to match the appraised value. This is the ultimate best case scenario for a buyer because the appraisal is, after all, a professional opinion based on other comparable homes that have sold in the same area in the recent months. So in all fairness, if there's no glaring issues with the appraisal report, the fair thing to do would be to have the seller to match the appraised value to the actual purchase price value. However, sellers don't always see it that way. The next option, which is not ideal for the buyer, is for the buyer to agree to overpay the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price. So for example, the purchase price was $315,000, but the house only appraised for $300,000. The buyer would agree to pay the extra $15,000 out of pocket in cash at closing. This is what has been happening a lot recently when you hear of buyers agreeing to waive their appraisal contingency. It doesn't mean that an appraisal never happened. It just means that the buyer agreed to pay an amount above the appraised value and the purchase price if the appraised value were to come in below what the purchase price is. The last major option is for both parties to come up with an amount in between the appraised value and the purchase price. This option has lots of different examples you can use, but I'll use one that is simple to understand and doesn't take as long to explain. But let's say that the purchase price agreed to was $320,000 and the appraisal comes in low at $300,000. What a buyer and seller could do is meet in the middle, where the seller would agree to reduce the purchase price to $310,000 and the buyer would agree to pay $10,000 out of pocket, and the lender would do a loan at $300,000. The seller would get $310,000, which is $10,000 more than the low appraisal value of $300,000, and the buyer would only be paying $10,000 over appraised value instead of having to pay $20,000 over the appraised value. So in that example, both sides agreed to an amount in the middle of the purchase price and the appraised value, and now you can move on to closing process. So those are the three big things that can usually happen if a deal is going to survive and move towards a closing. I tell most clients that the odds of everything working out go way up if you can get past the appraisal process. Are there things that can still happen after the appraisal that can cause a house not to close? Of course. But the big one single item that seems to be the most confusion around is the appraisal. I know the appraisal process can have a lot of questions around it, and I hope I helped explain a little bit as to how it works in Georgia. But of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on my team, and we'll be more than happy to help. And as always, we'd love to read your comments, so be sure to comment below, and also be sure to like and subscribe to our channel so that you can get all the videos we will continue to post to help you find your next dream home.